If you are looking to do the Root of Nightmares Lightfall raid on day 1, or really at any time, these are the weapons, exotic armor pieces, builds, and mods that I recommend you bring with you. And don't worry, I'll go over all 3 classes. Before I start though, if you want a team to watch before you run it yourself, I'll be competing in the world's first race on my stream, twitch.tv/Mactics, Friday at noon Eastern. Additionally, I'm giving away one GDS89 emblem code to a randomly selected commenter down below for every 1,000 new subscribers this video brings on board. So if you like my content and haven't hit that button yet, no better time to do it. Do your best to make sure that all of your weapons and gear are 1780 or as close to 1780 power as possible. Any power levels over this won't matter for the day 1 raid due to the contest modifier. Additionally, throw boss spec on all rockets and linears, and major or minor spec on everything else. If it's a Taken raid, however, then do Taken spec on non-boss DPS weapons instead, unless you are 100% sure that the bosses are coded as Taken as well, in which case you can put Taken spec on everything. Starting with kinetic weapons, Izanagi's Burden is the best burst damage weapon in the entire game, and when paired with auto-loading rocket launchers, makes for the best burst raid boss DPS available in the current meta. Being able to shoot the Izanagis, hold reload, and then stow it away to finish the reload sequence while you pull out your rocket that will also reload itself when you go back to Izanagis is a combo that simply can't be beat. And in a day 1 setting where damage is typically pretty tight and you need every ounce you can get, this is extremely important. Next up is Witherhoard, which is great for what I like to call endurance fights, aka bosses with absurdly large health pools and multiple DPS phases like the Caretaker from Valve the Disciple. It's also amazing for ad clearing encounters and particularly good for boss DPS phases on Starfire Protocol Warlocks to allow them to charge their grenades in the background while they shoot their heavy weapons. And finally, for our special ammo kinetic exotics, Arbalist can still hang despite the linear nerfs, albeit it's not the workhorse it used to be, but being able to crack any elemental shield and deal pretty decent far range damage with solid ammo economy can make this thing come in handy in certain situations, such as having to deal with a lot of tanky orange bar shielded enemies from range. For exotic primary weapons, you can't go wrong with Osteostriga. You practically don't have to aim with this gun, making it a very viable option for ad clearing encounters, especially with the Warlock Strand Necrotics build on my channel that we'll talk about later in this video as well. You'll also want to bring Outbreak Perfected for that one situation where you need to deal boss DPS and you run out of all heavy and special ammo. It's extremely unlikely with today's mod systems, but you never know, and it's better to be safe than sorry. For kinetic legendary weapons, you'll want a solid legendary sniper like Succession, a solid legendary shotgun like the Heritage, and any disorienting grenade launcher, bonus points if it has auto-loading holster or slide shot. Moving on to energy weapons, at least one person on your team has to bring Divinity. Divinity isn't quite the beast it used to be in the debuff department, especially if you have a lot of tether hunters on your day 1 team. However, for situations where you are having to DPS a boss that has a difficult to hit crit, or a boss that likes to move around a lot like Rolk, this thing is essential for being able to guarantee crits on your precision weapons like Izanagis and linears. Next up is Forbearance, which is an incredible ad clearing grenade launcher. Personally, I don't use this thing too much and in fact have the wrong role on it. You should have something like Ambitious Assassin and Chain Reaction, but it can be extremely strong, especially when you pair it with something like Osteostriga up in the kinetic slot. After that is an energy slot disorienting grenade launcher, once again with auto-loading holster if possible. This is mainly if we have enemies like Wyverns or mini-boss Tormentors that can be completely shut down by these. Although if someone in your team is running Strand and can suspend them instead, that can compensate for the blinding grenade launcher. As for your main bread and butter weapons in this category, you'll want to bring a scout rifle for long range situations and an SMG for literally everything else. I'd highly recommend trying to bring void options like Doom of Chelchis, Vouchsafe, Funnel Web, and Unforgiven if possible. I'll explain why a bit more as to why you want void when we get to the mod section. SMGs are simply the absolute best weapon archetype for PvE, so you'll have those on 99% of the time and swap to the scout rifle for encounters where you desperately need consistent range. Finally, for energy weapons, apparently Fighting Lion is bugged and doing absurd amounts of damage to red and orange bar enemies at the current moment. I'm assuming assuming Bungie will disable this for the raid if that is the case, but if they don't, then you might as well use it. In the heavy department, you need at least one Guardian on Gjallarhorn, no exceptions. That is because legendary rockets are the absolute best DPS option at the current moment, especially when paired with Izanagi's Burden. I know we all just farmed Adept Wendigos for a week straight, but the reality of the situation is that rockets simply do more damage. As a result, the other 5 members of your team will be running legendary rockets, preferably aggressive or adaptive frames, as those frames do a base 10% bonus damage to all enemies. You'll ideally want something with auto-loading holster to synchronize with the Izanagis, along with explosive light, lasting impression, frenzy, or vorpal weapon, those perks being ranked from best to worst. And if you are on a Starfire Warlock, you could also justify taking Demolitionist instead of auto-loading holster. And if you need a rocket that fits these specifications, spam as many Nightfalls as you can before raid day, and craft the Hothead from Zavala until you get a decent roll. For non-boss encounters where ad clear is the primary focus, you want a solid Void machine gun like Commemoration or Retrofit Escapade as well. And for those endurance boss style encounters that I mentioned previously, where I recommended you take Witherhoard, you might also want a linear fusion rifle as well. 4 times the charm, bait and switch Cataclysmic is the best option here, but other linears like Storm Chaser and Taipan will work just fine if you don't have this one. And for your final weapon, you want to bring the Lament. For that 1% situation that we have a boss where swords are the best option for DPS. Similar to the Outbreak, extremely unlikely situation, but better safe than sorry. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't mention Chill Clip Bump in the Night, Two-Tailed Fox, or Grand Overture, here's a speed round of why. Chill Clip isn't actually good on your whole fire team. At most, you want one Guardian rocking it because the shatter damage procs won't count for everyone if happening at the same time. Two-Tailed Fox isn't good because although it out DPSs every legendary rocket in isolation, it can't be paired with Izanagi's because it's exotic. So yeah, Two-Tailed is better than legendary rockets, but you aren't doing damage with just rockets. A legendary rocket paired with Izzy's dumpsters Two-Tailed along with whatever legendary sniper you pair it with any day of the week. And finally, Grand Overture is just not better damage than Izzy Rocket, similar to the Two-Tailed Fox argument, plain and simple. Also, if you have more questions about anything mentioned so far or anything else in general for the raid, ask in the comments below or in my live stream Twitch chat for a real-time answer. I'm live weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern and absolutely love it when people from the YouTube come over to say hi in the Twitch. As for artifact mods, Volatile Flow is a must-have and is why we want to try to have all of our ad clearing weapons be void, specifically the SMGs, scouts, and machine guns. Orb generation is so common with the new mod system that you'll basically have 100% uptime on volatile rounds regardless of what subclass you're running. Bricks from Beyond is also an amazing void mod to run as it grants an increased chance of heavy ammo drops from orange bar enemies when defeated with void weapons. And finally, for the void category, you'll want void weapon channeling, which is not actually that good because it doesn't stack with Radiant or Well or anything like that, but there's not really any better options in this column. Prismatic Transfer also falls in the exact same category as void weapon channeling, both in that it doesn't stack with other buffs, yet there really aren't any better options. Shatter Orbs will be amazing if there is void shields in the raid, so you might as well take it. You'll also want any mods that reduce mod cost, like Authorized Grenade and Authorized Void. Next up, Surge mods give you a 10, 17, and 22% elemental weapon damage buff that stacks with Radiant and Well for 1, 2, and 3 copies respectively. So at the very least, have a pair of boots with 3 of these mods on, matching either your heavy element or kinetic for Izanagi's that you can swap to right before you enter a DPS phase. As for orb generation mods, Reaper should be used by all 3 classes in 99% of circumstances. And yes, it's re-enabled as of like an hour ago. If you are running a grenade spam build like Starfire Warlock, you're going to want to make sure to run firepower. And if you are running a melee spam build like Arc Assassin's Cowl Hunter or Solar Loreley Titan, then you want to run heavy-handed. Regarding finder mods, there is literally no point in running both special and heavy finder, as you can get the same effect for 4 energy instead of 6 by running a finder and a scout of the same ammo type, while your teammate runs the same thing for the opposite ammo type. Ideally, you'll have 3 players with special finder and scout and 3 with heavy finder and scout. Finally, for reserve reserves mods, at least on boss encounters, I highly recommend having a chest piece with 3 reserves mods matching your heavy element type in your inventory. Before starting each attempt at the encounter, simply throw the reserves armor piece on, rally the flag, and then switch back to your main chest piece with your resistances or other mods on. You'll still keep the extra ammo in your reserves, you just won't be able to refill to that amount without putting the reserves chest piece back on. As for classes and what exotic armor and builds they should run, I recommend you listen to all 3, as even though you will only be playing one of the 3, it's important to know what strengths and assets your teammates can bring to the table. Also, if you find this helpful so far, please consider liking and subscribing. Regardless of which class you are on, you should bring a pair of Aeons with Sective Insight for heavy ammo on mini-boss or champion finishers. For stats on the classes, all 3 should be running tier 10 resilience under all circumstances. After that, hunters want to prioritize mobility and discipline in most cases, warlocks will look to recovery and discipline, and titans will aim for discipline and either intellect or strength. For class-specific builds, Omnioculus Hunter is the #1 option for survivability. Trapper's Ambush and Vanishing Step, along with Echoes of Persistence, Obscurity, and Starvation. If you want more details on the build, see my full guide video in the description, or pause the video and take screenshots of the mods on screen right now. Despite Omnioculus being the best survivability option, that isn't always the best thing for raiding. An exotic that allows you to be offensive so you can quickly execute mechanics is typically the move, for which the best option is Falcon's Halberd, the exotic that I will most likely be running myself in the raid to start. Stylish Executioner and Vanishing Step for aspects, and Echoes of Starvation, Persistence, Undermining, and Cessation for fragments. Volatile Flow makes this build easier to execute, and considering that it's already one of the best builds for Hunter with its base configuration, it stands as my #1 recommended all-around Hunter build for the raid. If, however, you are fighting a boss with a hard-to-hit crit and using Divinity, Tether isn't much use, in which case you are probably better off on Solar Star Eater Scales Hunter with Blade Barrage for the super, Knock 'em Down and On Your Mark for aspects, and Ember of Torches, Benevolence, Mercy, Searing, and Singeing for fragments. For ad clear focused encounters, you could totally opt into Arc Assassin's Cowl Hunter as well, with Lethal Current and Flow State for aspects, Sparks of Resistance, Magnitude, Feedback, and Shock for fragments, and Gathering Storm for the super. Make sure to run the heavy-handed mod on the gloves as well if you rock this build. Finally, for the Hunter, Strand is actually pretty solid for ad clear encounters. I know the super was bugged and just got fixed, but it's still really solid for locking down every non-boss enemy in the entire game. You'll match this up with the 6th Coyote, along with Shackle Grenade, Ensnaring Slam, Widow's Silk, and the threads of Warding, Mind, Generation, and Continuity. For Warlocks, I only have 2 notable builds. The first is the Osteostriga Strand Necrotic Grips build I just dropped a video on recently, linked in the description. This will be primarily for ad clearing encounters, however the damage super on this subclass isn't half bad, meaning that if you already have a lot of wells on your team, feel free to opt into Needlestorm for those bosses. Other than that, to the surprise of absolutely no one, Starfire Protocol Warlock will be the premier build of this raid. Fusion Grenade, Touch of Flame, Icarus Dash, and the Embers of Mercy, Resolve, Searing, and Torches for ad clearing encounters, or Ashes for boss encounters. Make sure to slap on a Firepower mod as well. If you want more info on this build, peek at the build video linked in the description. And last but not least, we have Titans. Arc Titan with Thundercrash will be your best option for boss encounters with Touch of Thunder and Knockout as your aspects, along with the Sparks of Resistance, Shock, Magnitude, and Focus. I'd also recommend Pulse Grenades here, best option for PvE in my opinion. And for the exotic armor piece, use Heart of Inmost Light until you enter DPS phase, where you'll then switch to Curious to the Falling Star to pop your super with, after which you can switch back after DPS. For ad clearing encounters, the new Ambient Leap boots for Strand Titan, along with the Into the Fray and Dranger's Lash aspects, and Thread of Mind, Generation, Continuity, and Wisdom for fragments, are pretty insane for survivability and lockdown. If that isn't your style though, you of course always have the option of Solar Bonkhammer Titan with Loreley Splendor or Syntheseps, along with Soul Invictus and Roaring Flames for aspects, and the Embers of Solace, torches, benevolence and searing for the fragments, and heavy-handed on the gloves. I would personally recommend against Bubble Titan unless you have literally 0 Warlocks on your team, since Well of Radiance is honestly just a significantly better version of Bubble in 99% of scenarios. As far as class composition goes, I would say that comfort is the #1 factor in determining which class you should play. It's not the end-all be-all, but should certainly be where you start with your decision. For example, despite Warlocks being arguably the best day 1 rating class, I'm significantly more comfortable on my Hunter. The power discrepancies between classes are minimal at most, so prioritize comfort over what you hear is best. That being said, I would urge you to try and have at minimum 2 Warlocks on your team so you have enough wells to last any full-length DPS phase we are likely to see. In that same vein, I'd recommend no more than 2 Titans. Despite being incredibly strong in the ad clear department, they lack severely in the boss damage category, with Thundercrash being the only option, which still gets out-hit by Warlock Needlestorm and Hunter Star Eater Blade Barrage. Not only that, but not all bosses can even be Thundercrashed anyway, so you might struggle with damage if you go in with mainly Titans. Comfort over everything, but if your comfort level across different classes is pretty close to one another, I'd recommend running Warlock or Hunter. And that's everything that I recommend you prep for the raid. Hop into my stream at twitch.tv/Mactics after you run and let me know how you did. Hopefully this video helps you get that first clear. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.